Welcome back to the Astro Read. We are your hosts, Stella and Nayeli. This podcast is all about astrology, celebrity news, and how to use astrology in your everyday life.
Welcome back to our current subscribers, and hello to all the new viewers tuning in today. If you're new, like our content, please feel free to just subscribe to this channel. Our goal is to reach 100 subscribers by the end of this year, if not more. And we've been building quite a community here, which is great. By continuing to gain subscribers, it allows us to continue making this content for this channel. And your comments help us get ideas on new episodes and what topics you want to see. All right, so this episode is about Canada, but in particular Justin Trudeau, because he's been, in the hot seat for a while, and Canada is going through some things right now, protests. And, people are looking at Trudeau, I think, differently than they used to, whether you agree with him as a prime minister or not. It seems like the perception of him has changed. He has two scandals under his belt at this point, with the charity We and then the company SNC Lavalin. So I think, people are wondering out there, is he a legit leader? Is he for the people, or is he corrupt and all about the money? And people just want to know, who is the real Trudeau? And this episode is going to, be a deep dive into Trudeau and the person he's likely to be, and some things that may not be apparent in the public eye. And, and against the backdrop of the Canadian context of what's going on right now, there's just so much to unpack, which we will unpack in this episode. So Stella, what are your thoughts as somebody that lives in the States right now? And by the way, I'm in Vancouver, for those that are not familiar. So I'm in Canada.
And I'm in New Jersey, so yeah. I'm over here on the other side of the, the border?
I guess, yeah, on the other side of the border, like south, but then also east, and on the west coast and north of the border. So we're honestly like opposed, like we're on opposite ends. And so we have both perspectives of like the American view, seeing what's happening from the outside, so to speak. And then I guess I have the viewpoints of seeing things from being in Canada. So yeah. So what's your take on like everything that's going on and on Trudeau?
Well, Trudeau has been around in a character, really a central character in the Canadian government now for almost 5 or 7 years, since 2015, or even
so about like almost 7 years, I guess 6 years.
Yeah. So he's been pretty important and pretty prominent in the astrology of Canada and its history, and he also inherited a lot of his popularity, his dynamism, his wealth, and his, education from his family, and that's very much indicated from his astrology chart, where he has Jupiter in the 4th house. It's very, sign that his father or his parents really helped to support his rise in power or his wealth, as well as expanding his ability to connect his wealth to his homeland, his wealth to his ability to not control, but really rule, and something that I wrote down was really like the ruler of Sagittarius is in its own sign in Trudeau's astrology, right? So Jupiter is in its own sign.
Yeah, so it's interesting. Yeah, very lucky placement for Jupiter. Yeah. It's in the 4th house. It's in Sagittarius. So yeah, that gives him, the propensity to have a lot of fortune, and luck, more so luck. And that brings the fortune. And also it probably makes Trudeau somebody that wants to pursue, what is the meaning of life? Like, what is his meaning? What is the truth? He might also have very strong views on what he thinks the truth is, and, puts that in the forefront. And, if you disagree with him, he has his truth, and it may or may not be based on facts. So sometimes it is. It
just depends on your own facts and your own set of facts, because, I'm going to be honest with you. This whole area of facts was just that Gemini, Sagittarius angle that everybody was taking. Yeah. North Node was there. Yeah. We had a lot of things going on when the the eclipses were going through it. So now that we've established what the truth is, whatever that is for you, we're moving on into that Taurus Scorpio, and that's going to really affect him in terms of his power, in terms of his government, in terms of what is going on. He's also got Uranus transiting Taurus, so it's like, you know, a whole bunch of stuff is going to be probably thrown at him. But I really think he is like the ultimate statesman. His, you know, Virgo rising, Jupiter in the fourth house of home, like really giving him luck in the place that he rules, in the place that he lives. His moon in the eighth house, you know, and of course there's just that Chiron wound sorely sitting in the eighth house as well, really reminding him in Aries, reminding him of maybe, you know, his lack of self-worth or his lack of knowledge to be able to connect the dots for people, to be able to connect with people, even though he's got a really strong sixth house in Aquarius. So, you know, it's like a lot of these polarizing effects in his chart. He's both insecure about his power because he has so much luck, and so much good fortune, but he's also very lucky and fortunate. So it's like, are they going to unseat him from power? Or is it going to be a tumultuous end to his government? Or is he going to be able to turn it around, you know, and release all of the things? I think something of note, especially with the eclipse season that's coming up, Taurus and Scorpio, is the truckers in Canada started their protest under, I think it was a void moon in Scorpio, so around January 25th or 26th, that they really started the bulk of the protest. And unfortunately, it being in Scorpio means that there's a darker side to the movement as well. And the question about, are we in the matrix and the matrix is tricking us, or are we in the real world and these people are really genuine? You know what I'm saying? And there might be some people that are very, very genuine in the movement, but there might be some people who are behind that are trying to sort of confuse, because even with the request that they had, I don't have like the list in front of me, but it wasn't really like the ultimate request of liberating, you know, the Canadian people. Like there's a lot more that they could have asked for. And it's like, you know, are they just going to the edge so that they calm the nerves down of the society, or are they actually there for the right reasons? You know, and I'm not trying to put anyone down. I think it's a wonderful thing. They're fighting for their rights. They're really into it, but we do have to question, what are the motivations? Who's really behind it? And then sort of like Trudeau's hiding. You know what I mean? Like over here in the States, they used to say people were in a bunker. Like it's got a little extreme, man. Like
he's coming out now.
Oh my God, because I thought that was really funny. As an outsider, I'm sitting here like, so we actually had a president call someone else out for being in a bunker, and you actually were in a bunker. Like, I think that's hilarious.
So I heard, you know, around the time that the Freedom Convoy started picking steam, you know, for lack of, literally and figuratively, Trudeau was kind of not MIA. And so I think his excuse was that his son had COVID or tested for COVID or was quarantining from COVID, and he was with his son, which, I mean, I don't know if that's a valid excuse. It may or may not be, depending on your opinion. But
I'm going to say convenient, but you know.
Convenient. I'm going to go with convenient. And so, he was nowhere to be found. And even politicians were like, where's our prime minister? But he has since come out of hiding, and he recently had a debate. I'm still getting to know Canadian politics. I'm originally American. So I think like kind of in their parliament or their House of Commons, they had this debate and he was there, and the leaders of the other parties in Canada were there. And, you know, Trudeau said things, you know, you know, the whole debate was like, what do we do about the Freedom Convoy? Because, you know, a lot of politicians, I mean, most politicians or a lot of them are calling for the Freedom Convoy to be stopped, but other people are saying, well, we should listen to these people and what they want. And then other people are saying, but people are tired of these restrictions, and this is like a real thing that's going on. So there was a whole debate about that. Trudeau spoke to that. I don't know how many solutions or new facts came. I'm using facts a lot. I didn't sense much substance in what he said, but that's okay. I think he has his opinion of what he thinks would be best for the people. As far as, you know, whether Trudeau is meant to be a politician, I think he is, sort of. You know, I think that's a question that a lot of people think, like, oh, you know, of course, like Justin Trudeau became a prime minister. His dad, it was a prime minister. He comes from affluence, like, but is he really cut out to be a politician? And I don't know if he's cut out to be the strongest politician, but I could see why he got to where he is. Like, he has a strong Venus presence. So he's very charismatic, not only in looks, but also how he just talks and just the energy he gives off. You know, he has Venus in the 5th house of love. And Venus is just very strongly aspected, very strongly placed.
I mean, it's right next to his north node. So, I mean, it doesn't get any better than that. Like, your destiny in this world is with Venus. And then what houses does it rule? It rules your 9th house, which is the house of, I believe, politicians, study, education, expansion, international affairs. So, you know, internationally, he was always seen very well, right? And then, of course, it also rules Libra, and I'm looking for where Libra is on the 2nd house. So again, it rules the house of his finances. And it's like, well, here he is, like, financially benefiting from his position and the luck that he has. Whether it was family connections or not, he is able to rise above the ranks, you know, regardless of whether he's good or not. And that might be, again, that Chiron sort of wounded aspect that he has with Chiron in the 8th house. Like, does he deserve to be there? And other people will question it, and he will question it. And like, what should he do? What should he not do? You could also, because it's an Aries, make him sort of insecure about his own education and his level of education, if he's old enough, because that was always a question as well. Like, is he old enough to be prime minister? Does he have the wisdom to do it? I don't think he was the youngest, but I think he was pretty young when he started getting into power.
Yeah, pretty young. I don't know. I remember when he became prime minister, I mean, it's like a heartthrob for a lot of people. Like, I've never seen anything like it. Like, when he became prime minister, I think I had just moved to Canada, or it was recent in my time in Canada. And my friends from back home were saying, your prime minister's so hot and all this stuff. And like, yeah, definitely hottest prime minister we've had in Canada. But yeah, he has a strong Venus presence in his chart. So it's like not a surprise astrologically that he would draw people in that way. And according to Placidus house system, his Venus would rule his midheaven, with his midheaven being in Taurus. So it's like his charisma and his looks help with his career. And then in Placidus, his Venus also rules the 3rd house of communication. So being able to like say the right things or have a way of communicating that draws people in. And that's definitely something I very much noticed from his chart. I also get a sense from his chart that he's very ambitious and hardworking. Like, he wants to be prominent, right? So he's a Capricorn to begin with, right? So that's his sun sign. So, you know, Capricorns are all about putting in hard work, being of a certain status, like reaching a high status, being ambitious. His Saturn is in his 10th house. So Saturn typically Saturn is associated with the sign of Capricorn, and it's in the house that's associated with Capricorn as well. So there's like a strong like Saturn Capricorn presence in his chart as well.
It's almost like a mutual reception in the houses. Like, they're sort of connected in some way. And I really I can understand why he disappeared, because his son got sick. His son being in the 5th house means he takes being a father probably very, very seriously. So he was probably very worried about his son, very worried about the outcome. And then he himself conveniently 5 days or 6 days after the convoy started got COVID-19. You know, I'm not saying it's alleged. I'm just saying, you know, it just happened to be a coincidence that he too had it as well. And it's like all this quarantining, all of these vaccines, everything that he's done, and he still got sick. But it's like he's also in a public eye. So he connects with a lot of people. He's around a lot of people. He might have even blamed himself for his son's illness, because he does have to be, you know, out in the public around others, you know, so he probably took it very personal and tried to make sure that his son was okay and watching over him, you know. And again, there's something that I actually learned that was really interesting in my research for this, that Saturn in Gemini people have a great fear of lung diseases. So it's
Really?
like,
That's
yeah.
interesting.
I was literally like,
Oh,
what?
no wonder he has to, whether you agree with his stance or not,
He's got
very
it.
scared of COVID. I mean,
Yeah.
if his chart shows that he would have a fear,
Mm-hmm.
or the, it could also mean that he might have weaker lungs, or like,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Or
the
might have had some respiratory issues when he was
yeah,
younger, or knows somebody who died of respiratory issues that really impacted him. You know what I'm
yeah,
saying? But something about respiratory issues and the fact that it's a pandemic about respiratory issues, I think that really hit home for him. So that's probably why Canada has been under such strict rule. He has a mentality like, this is deadly, this can kill people. And like something that I feel like there's a disconnect in the United States, we don't have free healthcare. It's very expensive. And like Canada pays for every single person that has to have treatment. Like every citizen has to pay for that treatment through their taxes, through the commonwealth that they all share. So it's like, yes, he has to take even more precaution because every single person's welfare could be affected because of this disease as well. It could be a total collapse of the system. And that's something else he probably takes into mind when he has Saturn in Gemini as well, because he sort of has this idea about what restrictions he can have, what limitations he can have within his own country, Saturn being opposite the fourth as well. You know what I'm saying? So yeah.
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, that's all good points. And yeah, he probably, for his son to potentially have had COVID, or potentially, had to quarantine because of it. It must have been very hard on him. And I didn't realize that about the Saturn in Gemini, but it kind of makes it make more sense as to why he has such a, I wouldn't say fear, probably a fear secretly, but why he has such a strict stance as to how to combat the spread of this virus. I think also, there's parts of his chart that to me show that he probably doesn't like confrontation. Like, it's interesting. I think Trudeau is sort of a confrontational person in a sense, but doesn't like to confront. So I noticed that his Mars is in Pisces. So Pisces, not Mars doesn't do well in Pisces. Maybe it's Mars. I don't know. Mars is very like, it's a planet of taking action, speaking up, like being aggressive. Pisces is not a very aggressive sign. So I think he's not like, even when he was in that debate, like, he did okay. Like, I don't think he did that great of a job.
He's eloquent. That's what Mars and Pisces gives you, eloquence of speech. But it gives you the ability to think about it, right? And he's got Mercury in Sagittarius, so that also makes him a big thinker. So he's thinking on a macro level, and everybody else is like, my individual rights. Like, that's what he probably looks down, no offense. He probably looks down on a lot of the people that are protesting, because he's kind of like, we have to think of each other. He's an each other person, especially Jupiter being in Sagittarius in the fourth house is going to make him really think about everybody's needs, everybody in the collective. How can we help Venus in the sign of the collective in Aquarius, everybody's needs, everybody else. So when he looks at people who are literally asking him to put other people on the line, because that's how he probably thinks of it, he's thinking these people are putting their friends, family, relatives on the line. He probably thinks down on them or looks down on them because they're not thinking about the collective. And sort of that makes you sort of tunnel vision in your ability to rule, because you're focused on, what you think is important, but the individual in Canada is finally getting a say. Like, no offense to Canadians, everybody's very nice, but there's always this underlayer of communication. Are we really nice? Are we really saying what we're meaning? You know what I'm saying?
100%.
And like, that makes it harder for them to really express themselves, because maybe there is an internal societal pressure to just be nice all the time. You know what I'm saying? And this is probably the first time many Canadians have felt the need to speak up for themselves, because the government usually does right by them. That you don't have to protest, because the government usually makes good decisions. This is probably the first time they've really questioned, seeing other countries and how they're under so much restriction. And their restrictions are going away. Even just the other day, you don't have to really, in South America, you don't really need any COVID test. You just need your shot, in most countries in South America. So it's been very hard for Canadians to look at the rest of the world easing restrictions and like the individual rights are no longer respected according to them. Not according, I'm just saying. I don't want anybody to be offended. This is a speculation. But yeah, he definitely looks down at the people who don't see society as a collective. So that's something that might be driving a lot of these conversations that are happening internally as well as his external actions. So
yeah, for sure. And also, you know, with his moon in Aries, you know, I think when it comes to things that make him emotional, it's probably about, you know, I find the moon in Aries people, they're very much like what they feel is what they feel. And like, you know, they don't really listen to other people's advice. Like what they think is what they think. And they're not going to hear the other side of it. Or if they do, they don't get it. So regardless of where you stand on whether you agree with Trudeau or not, like, he's going to have his views and he's going to stick by them. And then added to that, he doesn't really like confrontation, or he's more of that big picture thinker, right? So he's probably the type of person that needs to go away, think about things instead of be rah, like immediately saying things in the public eye. Also knows who was advising him and saying, you know what, like, wait till this boils over a little bit, just hide a little bit. I think, you know, based on his placement, he could say things that I feel like he says things and like doesn't realize the consequence afterwards, or like he's and then it kind of, he's eloquent, but then he could say things that can piss the wrong people off. So for example, like when people were starting to, I would say it was before the Freedom Convoy, and people were starting to question vaccine mandates, or just question in general, you know, just start to wonder or start to like really pick up and protest. And it was more local. I think Trudeau says something along the lines of, oh, it's just a fringe part of society that thinks this way. And I think, you know, I don't know if this is true, but I think the Freedom Convoy was like a response of like, oh, you say it's a fringe, we'll show you a fringe. And there's like 20,000 trucks like heading to Ottawa, right? So I think he can be dismissive in that way, where he's like, this is what I think. And he sees the big picture of society, but doesn't see, it's almost like it almost like backfires on him because he sees the big picture, but he doesn't see the factions that are being created under him that fringes, but are not fringes, or quite a bit bigger. And so with his Mercury and Sagittarius, it can make him very, very high level thinking of like, what's the ideal, what's the truth, but it could also make him say things without him really knowing what are the true facts, like what's really happening. And I think that's happened to him. Definitely that was like a big instance. And I feel like there was a cause and effect. Like he thought it was a fringe sentiment. And, you know, a lot of people decided to head over to Ottawa to show, hey, no, it's more than just like a small fraction of people that feel this way, hear us. And I think the news outlets don't really put two to two together of how that would make people.
No, the news outlets have been like proving why people don't trust them every single day when they don't report what's going on in Canada, when they don't report the massive protests that are going on all over the world. And that's what makes it difficult, because like if they were just honest, none of the problems that we have, even in the United States, would be happening, because they were so focused. Like they spent 4 years focusing on, you know, he who shall not be named, and they wouldn't ever be able to understand like their focus allowed for it to grow. You know what I'm saying? Their focus, where they weren't able to even dominate any news cycle without him. They weren't able to do anything without him, you know, and now they're messing up because they won't report on the protests that are happening, and the discomfort and the unhappiness with a lot of the restrictions that are happening all over the world. People who are vaccinated are upset. People who are unvaccinated are upset. Vaccinated people are upset, like, why do we still have to do this? And then unvaccinated people are like, why do we have to do this at all? You know what I'm saying? Like, and it's just the fractions are not invisible. They're huge. You can't pretend that they're not there. And Trudeau, unfortunately, his Mercury in Sagittarius is a blind spot. It's not a strength, you know, and then the fact that he doubts in a lot of his rulership, he makes it so that it is sort of like he works against his Chiron healing, which would be to acknowledge others. You know what I'm saying? That's what Chiron in Aries wants you to do, because Chiron in Aries is a very individualistic position. So you're going to look at your opinion more important than others. That's your ruler. You need to look at everybody's opinion. You need to be able to see everyone around you. And yes, he does see it because he's very focused on the greater good and on the outside world. And I don't think it's corruption. I think it's ignorance. And that sounds weird because, you know, Mercury's in a good position in Sagittarius, but the ignorance of the elite, as people would call them, the ignorance of the wealth class you're in, the ignorance of the ruling class you're in, the ignorance of not really being able to walk in other people's shoes, because you just can't. You can't connect when you're the son of the former prime minister, who's basically a millionaire, who's, you know, whatever history has been questioned or whatever it is, you still are that person. You can't walk in the shoes of a regular Canadian living day-to-day life under the decisions you made. You know what I mean? Just like many countries are facing right now, you put all these rules in place, you can't walk the walk. Like, I think, what's the name of the prime minister of England right now that's going through a lot? Boris Johnson. Boris Johnson right now is being faced with a lot of questions because he had not one, but many parties when everybody else was sacrificing. And so a lot of people are like, so what's the point? Why do we have to have all these rules? If you got to have, what's the point? You know, and of course, you know, they're tying it back to maybe some people getting sick. They're tying it back to some things that are going on. But we have to all realize, just because you're in the ruling class, and maybe even just the perpetuation of the pandemic itself helped us to open our eyes to what the injustices are, you know, to the earth, to the other people, to the worker, to so many things. Trudeau is sort of a microcosm of it, because he sort of represents all the things that are wrong and all the ways we can fix it. You know what I mean? If he would open his eyes, he would see around him, we could solve a lot of problems. If he would see other people's opinions and forget about his fears about respiratory disease and see that the individual can be trusted to make decisions now that we're beyond certain parts of the pandemic, you know what I'm saying, where people were dying, hundreds of people were dying a day. You know, and still people are dying because they won't get vaccinated, and that's what we're being told. I'm not gonna, you know, offend anyone, that people won't get vaccinated, the people that are vaccinated are dying, etc. And you want to be on a platform where you're telling the truth in an honest way, but you also acknowledge that there are other options, there are other people's opinions that matter. You know, there are other ways to approach it. You know, hopefully healthy ways where we're not, you know, destroying society in order to get what we want. Because and unknowingly, because that's what I feel bad for a lot of people. They don't understand, like, you're taking us to societal collapse because you're not offering a solution. You think that you're powerless because you're not running for government. You think that you're powerless because you're not actually involved in your local community. And I think Trudeau can inspire people to do a lot of things, but just like, no offense, Obama was a wonderful leader, he did not inspire people to really be active in their actions in politics. He thought we were in safe hands now. We don't have to do anything. Whereas now we have a new president in the United States where it's like, no, we need to do things. Like, we need to vote for people who want the change. We need to have people and put pressure on people if we want things to change. It can't just be we trust one leader. Like, Trudeau is very trusted when he was voted into office. We can't just trust one person to do the right thing. Every single person should be active and has a duty to their country to uphold their, you know, constitution, to uphold their, you know, laws, to uphold the future of their country. And hopefully, you know, this video will inspire some people to do something in their local environment and their local community, because Trudeau is just lucky. I mean, that's it. He was just lucky. He hit the lottery astrologically. But when you put your own astrology to work, you too can tap into that sort of luck as well, you know. And it wasn't just this silver spoon. He had to do the work as well. He had to learn how to communicate. He had to overcome his own fears about his individual, you know, self, and whether or not he could, you know, tap into the collective. And he did for a while, but the collective is sort of like individual rights have to be also acknowledged now. So
I think with Trudeau, I think, you know, I could totally see in his natal chart where you're coming from with he might have challenges with understanding the perspective of other people outside of like his experience. And that shows in his North Node. So his North Node is in Aquarius. And so that means that it's in the 6th house of work and daily habits. So that means like his sole purpose is to put himself in other people's shoes, like to do things for the people, to take on a more humanitarian feel. And he definitely has the ability to do that. But his soul comfort zone is in Leo, which is all about like being in the spotlight, like being adored, being looked at, being on a higher pedestal. So I think he comes from a background where that was his life, right? So that's like the comfort zone he goes into. But part of his soul evolution is to like open himself up and kind of understand where different people are coming from, whether he ends up agreeing with all those viewpoints or not. That's not the whole point of it, is to listen. And I think that's one of the things where I feel like maybe he kind of I would, for lack of a better word, failed. Like he doesn't necessarily have to do everything that the truckers want to do, but he won't even listen to them, right? So imagine being a citizen in a country and you don't feel like your prime minister will even listen to you. So regardless of whether you're right or wrong, that's not a great feeling, right? And so that's like the sentiment that Trudeau is putting out there, and it shows his chart, not being able to, having a hard time knowing how to compromise or seeing himself from other people's shoes. So he has certain Mars aspects that makes him really hard. It makes it hard for him to compromise. His sun is square Pluto. So that means he could be kind of temperamental. He's good at leading, based on his chart. But the challenge is he doesn't know how to compromise. You can be a great leader. You can know how to strategize. You can see the big picture. You could have good intentions, which I think, based on his natal chart, he could have likely had going into being a prime minister. But if you don't listen to other people, if you don't know how to compromise, if you don't listen to the people that, to be honest, pay your paycheck, then it's going to cause problems, regardless of where you fall into agreeing or not agreeing. His sun is also square Mars, also makes him very outspoken, but also makes him have like a chip on his shoulder that can make him very defensive. And so his Saturn is also retrograde. So Saturn has such a strong presence in his chart, and it's retrograde. And people that have Saturn retrograde tend to be secretly insecure, or they feel like they don't measure up, right? So imagine being the son of, this well-known prime minister, and, you're trying to measure up to it. And you
living in his shadow. Yeah.
And you might be secretly insecure about it, but you don't want to let anybody know, so then you become defensive. Like, he can't be wrong, because then that's going to make him weak. He can't listen to other people that he sees as not being relevant to him or possibly beneath him, because then that would make him a weaker prime minister. But what he doesn't realize is that maybe that could actually bring about a better result, like listening and not always thinking you're right. Doesn't mean you have to agree with people, doesn't mean you have to take certain actions, but if you just listen, like more in what he did as a politician, it could bring better results than what he thinks.
And like all politicians, like if you're watching this, you're a politician right now, and you're like, okay, so he's failing at certain things. What can I do better? If I was to say something to Trudeau right now, if you just gave Canadians a detailed plan of exit, it would solve all your problems.
Yeah.
Like, just write it down on paper on June 3rd, 2020. This is the date we're going to reevaluate, or give some sort of hope. And that's something like his very realistic energy in Sagittarius. Like Sagittarius is like pelao, like, sorry for the word. I'm sorry. It's very like, here it is. This is what it is. I don't care. What I'm saying? Wonderful energy when you're an adventurer. Wonderful energy when you're going out and exploring. Horrible if you're trying to rule people, because they want rules. They want parameters. They want to know when this is going to end, And so you've rolled back, and you thought Omicron was going to be this horrible thing, and now we're over it. What's next? What is the plan? Because the plan to keep us all in perpetual, just what feels like, honestly, years and years and years of continuing these strongholds as a government, probably not a good idea. You're going to have a French Revolution in your hands. Like, it's not a good idea. So move on, give us a plan. And that's definitely what I would say. And it's in his favor, because he's a great communicator. He can convince you that the sky is like gray when it's blue outside and the sun is out. Like, he can literally do that. But he will not use that power because of the insecurity. You know what I'm saying? And so if he uses his power in communication, in luck, to be able to give a plan, the Canadian people will trust you. They will trust Justin, Prime Minister Trudeau, if he puts forth a plan.
Yeah.
And that's what he doesn't understand about his luck and his astrology, is there is good things that he can utilize it for. He can convince you that the world is perfect if
Yeah.
he puts himself forward. He cannot hide.
Yeah.
Because as soon as he hides, it seems like, how can I say this? Where are the placements that make you make him feel untrustworthy? Uranus and Libra, Pluto and Libra. So people are going to sort of see that energy like, is there something else? Should I be worried? And all of those planets opposing his moon. You know what I mean? How people feel about you, how you emit your emotional energy, and they're going to see that you're afraid, so they're going to be afraid. And that's really where that fear-based Canadian relationship with their prime minister is coming from. If he doesn't control the power and control he has, he won't ever be able to communicate effectively so that his people can trust him again.
Yeah.
So hopefully that'll change. Hopefully you guys will have a plan. I'm saying that all of this, as I said previously, I don't know if this is going to be an episode that airs before or after Energy of the Spring, but in the Energy of the Spring video, I really go and lean on the fact that we're going to have all of the eclipses, the solar eclipse in Taurus, and then by the lunar eclipse in Scorpio, everything will be like over. Like that's really my prediction. And then looking at Canada's chart, it also goes in there because the eclipses are hitting Scorpio in the 8th house for them, and then Taurus in the 2nd house. So financial and spiritual sort of energy ending of the pandemic, hopefully, cross our fingers. And the people right now, in terms of where they are, they're going through Saturn and Aquarius, and it's probably going to be the hardest part because Sun is in Aquarius. So I'm predicting that once the Sun moves into Pisces, there'll be more understanding. And definitely by the time Sun moves into Gemini, there'll be sort of an end to all of this sort of tumult between the Canadian people, because it is a country that does generally get along with its government. This has been probably, as an outsider, the biggest news I've ever heard. Like, Canadians are protesting. They do those things
to this degree.
They do
to this degree, and for this reason, it's the biggest that I've heard of. I mean, protests happen in Canada. They usually don't get as publicized, but it's usually more because of the environment, like people protesting by the proposed pipelines, things like that. And then, when Black Lives Matter kind of reached another resurgence, there was a lot of protests in regards to that. But this kind of a protest where it's like making demands on the government, and having to do with the pandemic and 20,000 trucks or whatever heading to Ottawa. I've never seen anything like this living in Canada. Granted, I've only lived a few years, but I've never even heard of something like this. So yeah, this is definitely different. And, I think Trudeau has the potential to have good intentions in being a politician. I think he wants to help society. Like, I think what he ultimately does, like, he has his Venus in Aquarius, his Aquarius is on his 6th house of work. So he wants to be able to serve humanity. His Pluto is trine in good aspect with his midheaven. So that means he's capable of being a leader and being able to do that in a way where it can be optimistic. His Mars is in good aspect with Neptune. So that probably means he likes to take action that helps, that makes him that makes different people help each other, that, actions that show compassion. So I think he is sympathetic. And he does have good intentions, but I think challenges are, not being able to listen to other people's opinions. He has troubles with authority, maybe taking opinions from other politicians, which, has been seen where politicians are, for a while we're asking, okay, where's Trudeau? Trudeau, you need to do something. And then Trudeau's either not listening or not present. But
checked out. Sorry, guys.
Yeah. Or he's thinking of what to do next and maybe secretly panicking. I don't know. He definitely.
I'm gonna vote on he's not corrupt. He's just ignorant, and not ignorant in a nasty way, like, oh, he doesn't know what he's doing, or he's racist, or that type of ignorant. It's more like ignorant, like he wants to approach it in a very strategic way. He wants to approach it in a way that he doesn't hurt his reputation or his family's reputation, because he has a legacy, that he's a legacy, prime minister. But he also wants everybody to like him. And unfortunately, it's politics. Not everybody is going to like you.
Yeah,
Sometimes
there's parts of
you
this
do
chart that
things
show
that
that
hurt people or that make people angry at you. So yeah, what were you saying?
yeah.
Sorry, I cut you off.
No, sorry, I was just going to say, yeah, there's parts of this chart that show that he wants recognition, respect, with his strong Saturn Capricorn, since the fact that Venus is so strong in his chart, he probably likes being admired, but you can't.
Virgo rising, he's a people pleaser. Like
Yeah,
number one, people
yeah,
pleaser. Venus in Aquarius, people pleaser. Moon in, in Aries, like totally worried about how his image and how he presents himself. Like so it's a lot of little things that make him like, how can I make others happy versus like, and then the moments that he does take for himself, notice he had to take care of his son and like everybody was on, where did he go? Why is he in his bunker? Like,
mhm.
like what's going on? And the one moment he takes for himself, it's like the end of the universe. So, it's very
Yeah.
important for him to be visible, especially if he's going to be in political life. So, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, I think him pursuing a political career, I think has to stem from his mommy and daddy issues, which can take up a whole other episode. But basically, the houses that represent the mother and father are intercepted. They're completely trapped in a sign. And the way that he can get past that congestion, so to speak, is through the houses that are connected, that have the same signs on them, which two of them are the 7th and 8th houses. So both of those houses have the same sign, which I think is Pisces. And, and people that usually have the 7th and 8th houses, they're really good at getting the support of the people. And so a lot of them end up entering politics because they can convince people, influence people. So, perhaps him entering the world of politics was his way of trying to, I don't know, get out of the shadow of his parents, because there's definitely some wounds and congestion there. That can be a whole thing, but it's definitely present in his chart. Do I think that he is completely non-corrupt? No. And I'll tell you why. I think that Justin Trudeau is torn. I think that he is half half social activist, or half social advocate and half businessman. I think he has two loves other than his family and all that, and his wife, which I'm sure he loves very much. He loves being progressive and taking society forward and helping society, and he likes money. And so he's really good with money. And the funny thing is that his two scandals that he was involved in with We and SNC at Lavalin are both money related, both ways in which he potentially, or people he knew, were able to make money out of that situation. And so I think he is at times torn. And since he is somebody that likes to people please, with being in such a prominent position as a prime minister, I'm pretty sure people are calling him up and saying, hey, can you do me this favor? Can you give me $500 million and, I'll give you a cutback, and he probably does it because he likes money. And this is speculative. He could be somebody that does that for that, but also he wants to help somebody. He wants to help a friend. He thinks it won't be a big deal. So
he will be the one to get caught because he was trying to be nice to someone.
exactly.
And it sucks because it doesn't make him, that's why I disagree. It doesn't make him corrupt. I think it makes him gullible as well.
It makes him gullible and it gets him into corrupt situations. But it's the question, if you're doing corrupt things, but you're doing it for good intentions, are you corrupt at the end of the day or are you not? So that's a big philosophical that Justin could perhaps answer, because
the road to hell is paved with good intentions.
Exactly. So that's kind of, so I think it's more complex. His chart shows that he's more complex than his opponents make him out to be. They probably, people that are against him probably think, oh, he's just this corrupt leader and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, it's not that black. There's nuances there. His midheaven is in Taurus. So his ideal career is Taurus related, building value, building money. He's into that. He's drawn to that. But at the
building wealth. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, building wealth. But at the same time, his North Node, which defines his soul purpose, is an Aquarius in the 6th house. So it's like his soul is meant to be with the people, help the people, but then his midheaven is all about making money. So I think in the public eye, you don't really see the making money side because he's prime minister, but I think that's very much an influence with him, so if he gets those opportunities, he's going to be drawn to them without thinking of the consequences. And because he doesn't take advice very well, he probably gets into these situations that will ultimately put him into hot water and will not help him achieve the sole purpose of being for the people.
Yeah, his only luck is that he's able to convince people, I didn't do anything wrong. He can literally say the words, I didn't do anything wrong. People would believe him. And that's lucky. That's just his communication luck. You know, not everybody has it.
Yeah, he's very eloquent. He's charming. And then the
like, this is not a piece of poop. This is actually the most delicious. That's literally his sign placement for
people will eat them. Like, you're absolutely right, Justin.
Right, like, Justin. You're right. It's so cool. I love his astrology because it literally is like, it explains everything. It explains why you're hot. It explains why people believe you all the time. It explains why, even with the truckers against you, like, I think it was like a Canadian judge that basically said, like, you guys have no point, because he was like, not listening to Trudeau, but sort of like, we're all in this. We're all dealing with this. Like, we all have to deal with this. So I don't know the nuances of the case, but I do know that the truckers were denied something over the last few days in terms of the process.
I would have to get caught up on that. But a lot of it, Trudeau isn't really, like, regardless of whether you agree with the truckers or not, like, he's definitely not taking the stance of, I'm going to listen to you and like take.
And that's influential too. And that's what the whole problem is, that there are people who disagree with him. Absolutely. But he, like, can convince you that this piece of paper has the Constitution on it. No, like, he's like very persuasive in his astrology, and it's a very strong persuasion that allows you to trust him completely. And is it something that can lead to corruption? Absolutely, but his heart is not in that for the corruption. His heart is in it to help others. I think it's very admirable. If he could never be, like a Donald Trump or even like what's another good president, or another president that we've had, or an FDR and things like that. Like, he couldn't be those types of people. He is who he is. He doesn't want to be defined by the legacy of his father, but he is defined by it. And I think that that's something very honorable. He looked beyond his own circumstances and his own life in order to give back to his community, give back to his country. He probably finds it very patriotic. He's very connected to that patriotism to give back to Canada.
Yeah, for sure. So he does have good intentions. It's just how to go about it, right? Like, he has good intentions. He wants to help people, but he doesn't know what it's like to live like the average person, right? So it would probably be in his best interest to listen to people from different perspectives, so he can kind of have more information to make even better decisions. The other thing as well is that the ruler of his second house of making money and sixth house of day-to-day job are connected. Like, they're connected in aspect. And then the ruler of his daily job and the ruler of his ideal career are also connected. But the ruler of how he makes money and his ideal career are not connected at all, but they are both connected through his day job, which is being a prime minister. So it's become a conduit for him to help society, which is something that he, is something he wants to do, or it seems like it from his natal chart, but it's also a conduit for making money. And or he has gotten the opportunity to make money or help other people make money through being a prime minister, right? So I feel like this position connects him to the good, the ideal of what he wants to do, but also situations that can get him in trouble. And it's like, that's what he needs to weigh, like what decisions to make to create the best outcome, not only for the people, but for himself, right? And as far as what he will choose, who knows? But his chart kind of shows, in my opinion, that he has he has those influences, almost having like the good angel and like the bad angel on either side, right? Like, being a prime minister, he's probably meets so many people, has all these influences, and some of them may lead him astray. Part of his chart is his fixed star, and so this is a concept we haven't brought up in astrology yet, and in the astro read yet. So fixed stars is when fate sort of gets involved in astrology. Astrology is really a mix of fate and free will. Like, Stella, you've mentioned, your chart can tell you things about yourself and things about what you'll might encounter in your life, but it's up to you to use those tools to make your choices, right? So that's really what astrology, they are in the natal chart. There's like tons of stars, but there's certain stars that have more influence in your chart than others. So basically, if there's a star that hit either your ascendant, your midheaven, the part opposite of your midheaven, or the part opposite of your ascendant, then it's going to have an influence. And there's different types of stars. Some stars have more influence than others, and they kind of follow the Greek alphabet to go along with their level of influence. So alpha would be, very influential. And then, perhaps gamma would be not so influential, for example. So looking at Trudeau's chart, there is a fixed star that I think is pretty prominent. It's on his descendant, so the point opposite his ascendant, and it is called Fomalhaut. It's Fomalhaut, and it is an alpha star. So, one of the bigger stars in the constellations. And one of the most influential stars out of the fixed stars. And so having this star makes it likely that you will be prominent, that you will be a leader. So it's like, that's another indication in the natal chart of Justin that shows that he was meant to be in this kind of position where he is a leader, where he's a prime minister. I guess in his case, the thing is, this star gives the person success, fame, charisma, makes them be in the spotlight. But the person that has this star would have to choose, do they use all these talents to do good for people, or do they use it for corruption? So the person has the choice. Other people that have had this fixed star include Abraham Lincoln and Adolf Hitler. So that just kind of shows what path you could take, right? Abraham Lincoln had a good reputation. I mean, some people debate it. And then Hitler did not, right? So Trudeau's kind of in that vein. He is meant to have prominence, but it's his choice as to whether he's going to use it for good or use it for evil, right? But the thing is, if he chooses the path for corruption, it will certainly lead to his downfall. So that is a given. So unlike other corrupt leaders that get away with the corruption they do, if Justin,
yep.
Yeah, there's plenty. If Justin Trudeau decides,
seems like there's so many nowadays.
There's so many. If Justin, and in the past too, if Justin Trudeau decides to take the option of using his platform for corruption, whether intentionally or unintentionally, it will lead to his downfall. And that is why he can't get away with the scandals that he's been involved in, whether he intended to get involved in them or not, whether he had good intentions or didn't. He does corrupt things, people will find out. If he does corrupt things, he will be negatively affected. But that's his choice. It's his choice as to whether he will do good by the people, go along with the bad influences, and basically take the road to his downfall. But that is his destiny, and what he chooses is up to him.
Mm-hmm.
Literally like a Canadian Anakin Skywalker. He's like,
oh my gosh,
sides, and it's like,
well, maybe not even Anakin Skywalker, because what was Rilo Ken?
Oh yeah.
That's even more. Kylo Ren. I said it wrong. Yeah. I said it totally wrong. Kylo Ren, because Kylo Ren literally had that battle, whereas his father was so consumed by his sadness. You know what I'm saying? So consumed by the stuff. And then Kylo Ren, did I say right?
Yeah, Kylo Ren, yeah.
He has the sort of the inheritance of his father, but he doesn't have to take it. You know what I'm saying? I don't know how the first Trudeau ruled. I don't know his history, but I can see that this Trudeau is trying to do right by his people. He's trying to be kind. He's trying to, be activist, an activist president or an activist prime minister. Who listens to the most progressive part of his party and his people. However, as with most progressives, as with all progressives, we are, and I identify as somebody who really thinks a lot about, the future and what are the implications. So I consider myself that way. But there is honoring the past and moving towards the future. Mm-hmm. There is ignoring the past and moving towards the future. And then there is sort of this sweet spot where we can, make everybody happy. And that's sort of where Trudeau wants to be. And that's not possible.
Yeah,
either or. You can't make everyone happy. You can't please everyone. You got to go take care of your son because he has COVID. You got to go. You know what I'm saying? Like that's it. And convenient or not that you got sick at that time, whatever. But at this point, he's got to give the Canadian people a game plan, because he's gonna have like a freaking, revolt on his hands at this point.
It's tough,
Like,
if he's somebody that wants to make everybody happy, which I could totally see that from his chart and just his actions, by him making a plan, he's not going to make everybody happy. You know what I mean? Because it's just like, that's just, even a good plan isn't going to make everybody happy, right? It may not make.
Yeah, but the thing that I'm saying is communicating. That's probably where I'm missing the B. My sister says that all the time. Yeah. He needs to communicate. For him to succeed, he needs to communicate. Whether it's a plan, whether it's something he needs to say something.
Oh no, I 100% agree with you. I'm saying he should do that, but I could see that being a challenge for him, because that would require him making some people unhappy. And
I see.
So that's very a challenge, and that's why he's in this holding pattern of just like repeating the same things in debates, not having a plan, being in hiding for a little bit, coming out. He's this turning point for him. How he handles the situation is going to be a turning point in his time as a prime minister. But that's pretty much our profile on Justin Trudeau. I think it was really interesting to look at his chart. A lot of I didn't know what to expect looking at the chart, but it's definitely been interesting. So, I mean, regardless of whether you agree with Trudeau or don't, I think you could probably get insight from this episode to maybe understand him a little bit more. There's a lot under the surface that a natal chart of somebody can show.
Yeah. And of course, the North Node is in Taurus for Canada right now. So I think the main focus is going to be on recovery, financial recovery for the country, as will be across the world, because the North Node is in Taurus and it's affecting all of us. So, probably over the next few months, there's going to be a lot more activation of the economy, less talk about, going back into quarantine, and just refocusing on the financial, aspects of the country before North Node goes into Aries, which will be affecting Trudeau heavily, since Chiron is there and his moon is there. I don't know if he will win an election or lose an election, but it will definitely be something around his political career, around his standing in the world, around how people feel about him, and then about his own insecurities and what he's been able to learn from, the last time that Chiron was being affected by the North Node. So.
Yeah, I wonder how many terms a Canadian prime minister can do, but technically he's on his second one, sort of. Definitely. So yeah, who knows? It might be he's taken out of office. I would have to look to see how long he's supposed to be prime minister, or it could be something where maybe his time as a prime minister ends for whatever reason, because it's the end of his term, or he decides to leave, or he gets ousted in some way. It could be either of those things, and then that affects his confidence. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see, what happens in the next year or so with Canada and with really turning point times for sure.
It's going to be a fascinating time for Canada. I think it's a wonderful experience to be active and, political. Even if you're a part of a conservative voice or a progressive voice, like, it's good to participate. Please participate. If you take anything away from this video, Trudeau is just a lucky man. He's not the only man who can succeed in politics. Yeah. So, something for your community and help others.
I think that's important for Canadians, because I think when I moved here, Canadians would tell me, oh, politics is boring here. We watch American politics. Like, everything is okay here, And I think these times are showing, regardless of what side you're on, like, you can't just be sitting on the sidelines thinking like the government's going to have all the answers. Like, if you're not putting your opinion forth or getting involved, then you're never going to be heard, or you're not going to push society forward or the government forward. So I think maybe this is a wake-up call for Canadians to pay a little more attention to what's going on politically in their country.
Yeah, absolutely. And that they have a role, you know what I'm saying? It's not a passive role, and trusting completely in the government, or, on the opposite side, societal collapse because there's no trust in government, but an active role. Put yourself out there. Trudeau, just because he's the son of a prime minister doesn't mean he's the only one who can do this. You know what I'm saying? So, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
I would be interested to see if anybody from the trucking convoy is inspired to work in politics after. So that would be really cool to see.
That would be interesting. I guess we'll have to see how it goes. All right.
Yeah.
I guess that concludes this episode. It was a lot to cover, but very insightful. So thank you all for listening or watching. And I hope you found some insight from this. And we will see you in the next episode of the Astro Read.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.